بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Today's talk will be part 2 on Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha. Just to recap before we move forward, Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha was the second wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After the demise of Khadija radiyallahu ta'ala anha, which took place approximately in the 50th year of prophethood, 3 years before migration. At that time, Khadija radiyallahu anha passed away, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam then married Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha. And among her special features, one special feature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted Sawdah bint Zam'ah, that after the demise of Khadija radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she spent 3 years alone in the marriage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So although the marriage with Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha had already been established, however, consummation with the marriage did not occur until after migration. So she spent 3 years alone with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And last week, her piety, her generosity, her good character, her good habits in respect to how a wife should treat her husband were discussed. Today, this very topic will be continued. Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha was the only lady, the only woman in the eyes of Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha who she desired to be like. And I mentioned this last week, and I will repeat this, that Aisha radiyallahu anha said, if there was any lady, if there was any woman whom or in whose body I wish my soul to be, it would be Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha. For another wife to praise her counterpart wife or her fellow wife, this is not an easy task. But for Aisha radiyallahu anha to say this, it holds a lot of weight and value. And we will find out in today's talk more about this great personality and her great characteristics. Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha was the reason why the verses of the Quran in relation to hijab were revealed. Before the revelation of the verses of hijab, the women were very noble. They were very pure women, especially the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If they needed to carry out any tasks, they would do so at night, so that male members of the opposite gender would interact with them less, and their gazes would fall on them less as well. However, Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu did not like this either. And he would pass comments to Sawdah radiyallahu ta'ala anha, such as, I have recognized you. And you should go back to your home, because to come out in this situation, to come out in this manner is not appropriate. When Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha heard comments like this, she immediately made mention of these comments to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard these comments, Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha reports that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was eating, and as he was eating, another wahi, another revelation came upon him. And this revelation, this wahi, was in respect to the verses of hijab. So it was Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha who was the means of initiating and establishing women rights. In today's day and age, the word women rights is most oftenly used. Now we have to look at women rights from Allah's perspective, from Allah's Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam's perspective. So it was Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu anha that was the means of these verses being revealed, and eventually till today's present times and until the day of Qiyamah, many ladies were able to protect their chastity, are protecting their chastity, and will continue to protect their chastity through the commands and instructions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in respect to hijab and niqab. Another great characteristic which Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu anha possessed was the desire to be with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the hereafter as his wife. Now there's a story attached to this. And if we listen very attentively, all my dear sisters, my dear mothers, my dear daughters, we will understand the level of love, the level of sincerity, the level of concern of the hereafter which Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala had, and we should measure our level according to her level, and then strive to become like her, Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha. When Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu anha reached an old age, now keep in mind when she married the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she had approximately 5 children from her previous marriage. So she was a widow. When she reached her old age, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's age was approximately 50, 53, 54, 55. Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu anha, she feared that because of my old age, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam may give me a divorce. He may separate from me. So Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu anha, she approached the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "O Rasulullah, that I have reached an old age, and the feelings which a female and a wife has towards a male and her husband, those feelings are no longer with me. And I fear that you may leave me, and I would like to be your wife in the hereafter. Please don't leave me. Please don't leave me, and please don't deprive me from your companionship in the hereafter." When Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiallahu ta'ala anha made these comments, the following verses were revealed. وَإِنِ امْرَأَةٌ خَافَتْ مِنْ بَعْلِهَا نُشُوزًا أَوْ إِعْرَاضًا فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا أَنْ يُصْلِحَا بَيْنَهُمَا صُلْحًا وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ وَأُحْضِرَتِ الْأَنْفُسُ الشُّحَّ وَإِنْ تُحْسِنُوا وَتَتَّقُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرًا وَإِنْ يَتَفَرَّقَا يُغْنِ اللَّهُ كُلًّا مِنْ سَعَتِهِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ وَاسِعًا حَكِيمًا. That if a woman fears ill treatment from her husband, if she fears that the husband may leave her, there is no sin upon both the husband and wife that they reconcile with one another. وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ, and reconciliation is best. If وَإِن تُحْسِنُوا وَتَتَّقُوا, if you treat her cordially, in a friendly manner, and you adopt taqwa, indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fully aware of what you are doing. وَإِن يَتَفَرَّقَا, and despite rectification, despite trying to settle the matter, despite reconciliation efforts, if the husband and wife have to separate, يُغْنِ اللَّهُ كُلًّا مِنْ سَعَتِهِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make each party independent of each party. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most generous and He's all wise. In these verses, beautiful Islamic teachings have been explained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to both the husband and wife. In these verses, two fundamental principles have been mentioned. Number one, Islamic law, the principle of Islamic law. If a lady, if a woman, if a wife has become or is unpleasurable to her husband, and the cause for this displeasure is out of her control. For example, she's unattractive. The wife is naturally unattractive. Or the wife is attractive, however, her characteristics, her morale, are unattractive. Or at the time of marriage, she had attractiveness, beauty in terms of physical features and in terms of good morals, but over time, these good characteristics and good temperament and good nature changed. And now the husband has become displeased with her self. So if this is the situation, then the Sharia, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Islamic law, allows the husband imsakun bi ma'ruf aw tasrihan bi ihsan. If the husband is unpleased, if the husband is displeased, then either he retains her in good faith. He keeps her in good faith. He keeps her as his wife. He fulfills all of her rights. He treats her well. أو تصريحا بإحسان. And if for whatever reason this is difficult for him to carry out, then he should leave her in a good manner. Divorce her in a good manner without harming her. This is the Islamic legal right of the husband. So this is if he has no control over the situation. And if he has control over the situation, let's assume bad morals, ill temperament is from the wife's side, and he has tried to fix that. He has tried to settle the matter by counseling her, by having her parents counsel her, by involving other parties which are able to help in this matter. Yet she does not yield. She does not change herself. So the husband has tried verbally. The husband has involved other parties. The husband has made dua for her. The husband has, through other sources and resources, tried to fix the ill habits which exist in the wife. Yet she still doesn't want to change herself. So again, in this situation, the Islamic law says that if the husband wishes to keep her, he may keep her, but if he does keep her, he must fulfill all of her rights. And if he wishes to release her, then he should release her in a good manner. This is in respect to the husband. The same law applies to the wife. For example, if the husband is not fulfilling all the necessary rights of the wife, and the wife wishes for a divorce. So one option is that the husband gives the wife a divorce because he's unable to fulfill all of her rights, whether those rights are financial rights, physical rights, moral rights, Islamic rights. This is the easiest option. Another option is that the husband is unable to fulfill the wife's rights, but the wife, instead of demanding a divorce, likes to keep her husband and likes to stay with her husband because there's other motives and objectives attached to the marriage. For example, the kids may suffer. If the wife splits, if the wife separates from the husband, the kids may suffer. The wife knows that the children need their father in their life. Or, let's assume she has no children, or she does have children, but she feels that if the husband is separated from her, she has no financial support. She'll have no moral support. And her life will deteriorate. So despite the husband not fulfilling her rights, instead of demanding a divorce, the wife simply bears these difficulties and stays with her husband. So this is a very great meritorious act. Either it's from the side of the wife or it's from the side of the husband. If the husband is unpleased, yet he still fulfills all of her rights, or if the wife is unpleased and yet she fulfills all the rights of the husband, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes extremely pleased. Extremely pleased. Because this is a very difficult task to carry out. So both husband and wife can exercise their right, and in the situation of the wife, if the wife wants to exercise her right and demand a divorce and the husband is not giving her her divorce, then she needs to refer to Islamic courts. And in the absence of Islamic courts, she needs to refer to the ulama ikram. And they will guide her in this process. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ. Instead of the husband and wife exercising their rights, they should reconcile the differences. They should sit down on a table, discuss their differences amongst themselves. Without a dire necessity, a third party should not be involved in that reconciliation. Only if reconciliation efforts are not successful, then a third party, in the form of parents, in the form of seniors, in the form of elders, in the form of an imam, in the form of a senior ulama who are experienced in this field, only then should they be involved in this matter. Otherwise, only these two parties, the party of the husband and the party of the wife, they should sit down and reconcile their differences. They should settle their own disputes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالصُّلُوحُ خَيْرٌ, and reconciliation is the best. This means if the wife has to forego some of her rights, then she should do so. Let's assume, in the first scenario, the husband is unpleased with the wife, and he has the right to either keep her or leave her. So if the wife forgoes some of her rights, for example, she forgoes her right of receiving full dowry, and she says that I forgive either full payment or partial payment, or full dowry or partial dowry, but keep me in your marriage. So this is allowed in the Sharia. This is allowed in the Sharia. And likewise, if the husband is not fulfilling all of her rights, and the wife says, I will bear it, but I would like to stay with you, because by leaving you or by you leaving me, it will affect our life, it will affect our children, it will affect my life, my health, my physical self, so I forgive some of my rights, which you were not fulfilling to begin with. Again, this is allowed. But life and marriage operates in such a manner that there's always ups and downs. There's always ups and downs. So a person has to give and he has to take. And my most honorable respected teacher and Sheikh Hazrat Mualana Salim Dora Sahib Damat Barakatuh mentions a very beautiful principle. He says that I always tell the bridegroom and the bride at the time of marriage, instead of demanding your rights, fulfill each other's rights. This is a very important and a golden principle of marriage. Instead of demanding each other's rights, this is my right. You must do this. You must do this. You must do this. So instead of demanding each other's rights, why don't we fulfill each other's rights? And we can only fulfill each other's rights if we know those rights. It is this reason it is important for the husband and wife to educate themselves Islamically in respect to each other's rights. So the husband will read a book on the rights of a husband and he'll demand his rights, and the wife would read a book on the rights of a wife and she will demand her rights. So instead of reading books on each other's rights, on the rights of themselves, they should read books on the rights of the opposite gender. The husband should read a book on the rights of his wife, and likewise the wife should read a book on the rights of the husband, and then they should fulfill those rights. So society teaches us to demand rights. Unfortunately, this is how society has become. And because we live in this society, the effects of society have now rubbed off onto our Muslim families. We're also demanding our rights. The situation should never ever lead to where we are demanding our rights. Rather, the husband should wholeheartedly and happily fulfill the rights of his wife, and likewise vice versa. And again, if there are ups and downs, then those ups and downs, those differences should be settled. They should be reconciled with one another. So Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiallahu ta'ala anha, when she reached an old age, she feared that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam may leave me because of my old age. Now keep in mind, during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a very great Sheikh, Hazrat Mualana Yusuf Ludhianwi rahimahullah ta'ala, was asked this question. The Sheikh was asked this question, that how can it be that the Prophet ﷺ would give a divorce to his wife on the basis of her being an old lady. This further confirms and this further strengthens the arguments and objections of non-Muslims in respect to the Prophet ﷺ. So the Shaykh gave a very beautiful answer. So his answer comprises several points. Point number one: during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, issuing a divorce was not considered to be defective and a means of deficiency. Divorce in our cultures, divorce in our communities is considered to be tantamount to the day of Qiyamah. But this was not the situation during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. That's point number one. Point number two: Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the Prophet ﷺ an option. تُرْجِي مَنْ تَشَاءُ مِنْهُنَّ وَتُؤْوِي إِلَيْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. The option was that if the Prophet ﷺ would like to allocate turns for his wives, he may do so. Now, if a general Muslim nowadays and age was to marry 4 wives, it's mandatory for him to be just and fair with his wives. He must allocate a turn and a day for each wife. But this was not the case with the Prophet ﷺ. It was optional for him. That means at that time he had 9 wives, and each day or each night would be allocated for 1 wife. This was optional for him. It wasn't mandatory for him. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذَلِكَ أَدْنَا أَن تَقَرَّ أَعْيُنُهُنَّ وَلَا يَحْزَنَّ وَيَرْضَيْنَ بِمَا أَتَيْتَهُنَّ كُلُّهُنَّ. If you were to allocate their turns, this would be a means of coolness and happiness for your wives. This will not allow them to be overwhelmed with grief and sorrow. And this will make them happy. So although this wasn't even mandatory to begin with, the Prophet ﷺ practiced upon this policy despite it being optional for him. So Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu anha, she wholeheartedly sacrificed her turn. And she said that I give my turn to Aisha radiyallahu anha, who is your beloved, solely to seek your pleasure and solely to be your wife in the hereafter. The Prophet ﷺ wholeheartedly accepted this offer from Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha. Now keep in mind, allocating turns does not mean that the Prophet ﷺ would see a wife after 9 days. No. After the Asr Salah of each day, the Prophet ﷺ would make rounds to each wife's home. He would visit all of his wives for a small amount of time, let's say 10 minutes, 50 minutes. And the turns which were allocated during the night only, not during the day. During the day, the Prophet ﷺ was engaged in his dini affairs, in his dini matters. And again, every day he would meet and he would look after all of his wives. He would see each and every single wife of his. But the night was allocated only for 1 wife. So this turn which Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala owned, she gave her right, and keep in mind this was optional, she gave this turn to Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala because she knew that I have reached an old age and I no longer feel the feelings that a wife feels towards her husband. In other words, I have lost the feelings of intimacy. So the Prophet ﷺ accepted this proposal and this offer, and the only reason why Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala even proposed this, because she felt that I don't want the Prophet ﷺ to be put off by my old age. Now, my dear sisters in Islam, majority of the husband and wives, they are either the same age or they are very close in age. So the age factor is not a factor which normally puts off the husband. However, there are other factors, especially in respect to the characteristics of the wife. Bad morals, showing ingratitude, speaking in an ill-mannered, objecting to the husband's decision as long as those decisions are in line with the Sharia. And let's assume if those decisions are not in line with the Sharia, then the wife, she should make her voice heard, but she should do it in such a manner which shows good morale. So again, وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ, reconciliation is best. And this is a very important point for our young couples to understand. Upon every dispute, upon every uneasiness in the home, there is absolutely no need for the husband or for the wife to resort to separation or divorce. This simply means that there's no love between both the husband and wife. There has to be love between husband and wife. There has to be affection between husband and the wife. And both husband and wife have to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching them. They are not free to do what they want, how they want, whenever they want. Rather, they should fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because what goes around comes around. So Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha was extremely passionate about the companionship of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and being with him in the hereafter. Next, Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha passed away. There's two narrations. According to one narration, she passed away in the 54th year of Hijrah, during the reign of Muawiyah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And the more preferred opinion is that she passed away in the 22nd year of Hijrah, which was during the Khilafah and during the reign and control of Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. This was the most preferred opinion. And she narrated approximately 5 hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and 1 hadith has been narrated in Sahih Bukhari. So this is just a glimpse of the good characteristics in the life of Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha, who was one of the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And let us try to listen to the talks of the ulama ikram. And those who have interest in reading, they should read good, authentic, reliable books under the supervision of ulama ikram. Because just as I mentioned before, if a person does his own self-studying, does his own self-research, when he comes across points like this creates grave misunderstandings in his mind or in her mind. And then a person says, well, how can the Prophet ﷺ do this? So he has to understand the entire situation, the environment during that time, people's mindsets, the traditions, the formalities, the culture of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, the culture of the Arabs. And when the whole entire background is open in front of him, only then will he understand why a certain action was taken. Nonetheless, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant all of our sisters and mothers to adopt these beautiful characteristics, these beautiful morals, and these beautiful teachings of Sawdah bint Zam'ah radiyallahu ta'ala anha. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Sadaqallahu al-azim.